Hey friends, we are back at livecoding.ca. My name is Nick Taylor, and today I am hanging out with Ian Douglas from Postman.
Thanks for having me. It's good to hang out, Nick.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I was just wondering, for folks who might not know you, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I work at Postman. I've been in the tech industry for a minute, many minutes. I think I calculated at one point it's almost a million minutes. Over 26 years in the tech industry. Originally from Canada, not too far from where Nick is actually, a couple of hours from Nick, and moved down to the States in 2000, and been enjoying it down here. Lots of opportunity down here for all kinds of development work. Currently work over at Postman. I do live streaming around interview preparation in the evenings, but I also do
Okay.
live streaming for work as well, where I do something that I call learning in public. And I'm going to be hanging out with Dan Moore tomorrow on the
Oh,
stream, and
cool.
we're going to watch me struggle through some auth. Having a good
Okay.
time with that. But yeah, live stream for work. We have a regular live stream with Postman that you can go check out on Twitch as well. And I love just all things nerding out technology wise, lots of 3D printing, lots of Lego, all kinds of fun stuff back here. Plus all
Okay.
the blinky lights and stuff in the background. So lots of fun little IoT
Yeah,
projects and programming things to make things happen. So
I think you got a slightly better setup than me in regards to that, but
yeah.
it's all good. It's all good. I've been slow. That's the fun thing about streaming. You learn as you go along. I remember first. I mean, we'll definitely get to Postman in a minute, but I just remember my first stream was literally I had OBS, black screen, my webcam, and I shared my screen. And it's definitely a lot more interactive now and a lot more polished just because I you just learn stuff as you
You
go
learn, yeah,
along.
you learn as you go for sure. And watching other people stream, you kind of pick up little tips and stuff like that. So I actually just hit my 1 year as a streamer on Twitch
Ah,
a
nice.
couple of weeks ago and hit 1,000 followers at the same time. So
Cool, cool.
we're going to be doing a giveaway on my stream next Thursday for all of that as far as the
Ah,
celebration goes. But yeah, it's fun just helping people out and being around to help people. I'm sure we'll nerd out on some interviewing stuff at some point today too.
yeah. No, congrats on the thousand. I'm getting close to 400. Prior to doing my own stream, when I was working at Dev2, I pretty much put most of my time into that. So my own stream kind of got neglected. So we're gonna talk about Postman, and I'm gonna drop a link to the Postman website, and also you can check out their Twitter if you want to give them a follow. For folks who might have never used Postman, what is Postman?
So a lot of people know of Postman as being like an API testing tool, but it's actually a full API platform now, where both as a
Okay.
consumer and a producer of APIs, you've got all the tools that you need in there. So from the consumption side of things, which is what most people are using it for, you're going in and you're making GET requests or POST requests. When you're testing things in a browser, the browser can, like when you type things in the address bar of your browser, you can only do a GET request, where
Yeah.
Postman will allow you to do like a post, a get, put, patch, delete, all those, as well as like all the HTTP methods actually. And on the production side too, we've been adding more and more tooling around how to actually go build the API and design it and define it inside of Postman. A new catchphrase that you may see kind of around the industry lately is what we call API first. And so it's this whole mentality
Yeah.
of how do we treat our API as like a really prominent important part of our business. And so we're putting a big emphasis at Postman around this whole API first sort of movement and what that means
Okay.
for companies and how to start developing those APIs inside of Postman as well. So you can go in and you can actually start defining, using something like Swagger or OpenAPI. OpenAPI is the new version of Swagger. And
Okay.
how can we import those spec files into Postman to finish designing things out and then add all the test code that most people are used to seeing in Postman for ensuring that the payload comes back in a specific way, that your data types are matching, like all what we call contract validation there. And
Okay.
so we see a lot more companies using it. We're over 20 million users now. We get something like 500,000 users a month signing up,
Ah, okay.
and lots of people using it every day. And we're starting to see more and more companies adopting it as a full API platform now, as
Okay.
opposed to just, hey, we have an API, let's go use Postman to go like hit our own API. They're starting to use it to actually develop the API now too.
That's interesting because yeah, from the outside, because I haven't used it that much recently. I think I used it in its earlier days more when it was. I think it started off as a browser extension. Is that right?
That's right.
Or that's when I was using it more. I think, and yeah, whenever I would reach for it, it would be like, yeah, I need to test out an API. That's what I always went to it for. So it's interesting to see that you can do so much more now. So we'll definitely take a peek at that. I'm just gonna switch this over to pairing view, and I have Postman opened up here. I don't know if you want to maybe kind of just walk through some of the UI here, because you were talking about like, well, there's a lot in here. So I guess is the best place to start first going to a workspace, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, so everything needs to happen in a workspace to begin with. And so from that workspace, you'll basically figure out what other APIs do you want to use. And so from that workspace, you can basically copy over other people's API collections from there. And so like a typical source repository kind of thing, you can actually fork those collections into your workspace. And that, just like, Git or Subversion or Bitbucket, things like that, it'll basically track a reference. So if you fork my API, for example, and I make a change to my API, you can pull those changes into your workspace as well. And so you can always keep your stuff up to date. And then just like revision control, you can also suggest changes back to me, and I can have the option of merging in a pull request. And we can do all of that right inside of Postman. And so teams are starting to use Postman very collaboratively now, as far as like making those changes and suggesting changes to one another. But also, if you just want to pull down, say, the Twitter API, and you find a bug in their documentation, or you want them to update something in one of their API calls, you can actually send a merge request back to them that they then have the opportunity to go in and merge or evaluate on their side to see whether that's something that they want to update and change on their side too. So there's a lot of that sort of capability as far as like branching things off and maintaining APIs and so on. And so, yeah, everything will start in a workspace. From there, like, let's go find some APIs. So as an example, Netlify has some APIs, and those are in the public API network inside of Postman. And so if you start up a new workspace, you can then fork Netlify's API into that workspace as well.
I didn't even know we had something in Postman. I didn't know that.
Well, let's go tinker with your own API today. So let's go ahead and create that workspace down at the bottom.
Okay. And I can just go personal for now, or keep it public?
Yep, either personal or team. Either one's fine. If you make it public, there are some implications there about the data that you set and so on is also going to be public for others potentially. So usually if you're just tinkering, I usually recommend like keep it on the personal level or at a team level so that you're not sharing stuff outside of your organization. In that search bar up at the very top, this is where you can search our whole API network from here. So we can just search for Netlify. And we should see an option at the very top, API Evangelist. So API Evangelist is someone on our team at Postman, and basically they found that Netlify has an API specification. And so we kind of pull it in, and that's kind of our encouragement, like, hey, Netlify, we'd really like you to use Postman. But we were able to basically find your open API spec and pull in all of these endpoints into these collections. So what you can do now is where it says Netlify's API documentation at the very top, what you can do from here is this is where you'll fork the collection. So you can say create a fork. And what this is going to do now is it's going to copy this into your workspace. So you can give this label whatever you like. So you can just call it Nick, or you can call it live stream or whatever. And then under that, you're going to pick which workspace that you want to copy this into. If you leave that checkbox checked, you'll actually see a little notification bell up in the top right corner next to the Postman icon up in the very top right corner. And that'll basically send you notifications there. If we ever make changes or if someone makes changes to this API, you'll see notifications popping up in here, and then you'll have an opportunity then to go examine those. So we'll go ahead and we'll fork that over.
Yeah. And this is all public, obviously, from what I can tell. I've never actually used these APIs myself.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is because that open API spec was publicly available, we were able to kind of pull that into Postman so that other people can sort of see the Netlify API and get access to it. But now you've made a copy of this in your workspace. So now we can actually go figure out what do we need to do, what do we need to tinker with. Over on the right panel where we see the documentation happening, what I like to do is I like to click at the link at the very bottom. It says view complete documentation. What this will do is this opens it up in a whole tab where we can see a little bit more expanded documentation. There's also a jump to, which is kind of like a table of contents.
Okay.
Now, this is kind of an introduction, and all of this documentation was actually part of that Open API spec. We didn't go build any of this manually ourselves. When we import the Open API spec into Postman, it'll actually generate all of this stuff based on that Open API spec. So your team has actually done a really good job building out that Open API spec in order to pull all this stuff in.
Nice.
So what we can do is we can kind of scroll through a little bit, and what we'll notice as you scroll down and start seeing all of these API endpoints is we actually go through and we document all of these collection requests as far as like how to call them. We can change which language we want to use. Right now it's set to curl, but you can set it to say Python or JavaScript, get a code sample in some other language, but it'll basically show you this is how you need to call these endpoints. With most APIs, we need some kind of authentication or authorization details. It looks like that maybe wasn't documented as part of the Open API spec. So we would have to go figure out, okay, well, how do we go get an API key for Netlify and then actually use your APIs, and what would be possible? So, for example, just kind of browsing through, it looks like we can build forms. It looks like we can maybe do some webhooks. We can create tickets of some sort. We can get a list of all the sites that we build with Netlify, or create a site on the fly. We can really start poking at this API and start doing some really interesting stuff with it. So all we know from here is that there's authorization required. And if we click on Netlify's API documentation, that link that we see right in the middle there, where does that link take us? So that takes us back to the documentation, where there's another link just up a little bit from where your mouse pointer is for the online docs. Yep. And so now we can go click on that, and that'll take us over to Netlify. And this is basically all part of that Open API spec that we pulled in. We basically grabbed a copy of this and put it online for Postman for people to discover your API. So from here, then we can figure out, what kind of auth do we need? In this case, it looked like we needed OAuth of some kind. And so we can start going through the documentation here, figure out how do we build that authentication. Looks like just a bearer token. So it looks like we can get an OAuth 2 access token and put that in and go from there. I like that Netlify has just this personal access token link right in the middle of the page there. It looks like we can go build that access token and start tinkering with those APIs. And so Postman, like I said at the beginning, a lot of people know it as like how to go test out someone else's API. And so this is a good example of, okay, well, it took us over to the documentation. We can go get that access token. Now we can go figure out how to build that stuff out in Postman and go look at any other sort of testing code and make sure that things are working the way that we expect them to, and so on. Lots of really interesting stuff that we can do with Postman now.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just going to make sure I log out of my work account before I do anything here. Last thing I'm doing is taking somebody's production site by deleting a website. Okay, I'm logged in as personal. Just going to do this up.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, so I got a token, which this is a question I have. Like obviously, if I'm not streaming, I don't really care what people see when I'm, it's just me pasting in the personal access token. Is there any way in Postman to mask certain stuff like credentials or?
There totally is. So if we go back over to Postman, if we click on environments over on the left side, what we can do is we can create an environment here. And what we can do is we can put the API key inside of this environment. So there's a couple of considerations here that we want to do. So you can just give the environment any name. We'll just call it like dev or something like that.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is we want to set a variable name here, and we'll just call it like access token, or, I like to be a little more explicit, like this is the Netlify access token, because this environment might have like several things. And then what we want to do is we want to set the data type to secret, where it says default right now. We want to set to secret. Now we do not want to paste it into initial value. Anything that you put inside initial value will actually synchronize back to the Postman servers, which some teams want. And if you're doing things on a personal level, then that's fine. But if you're making a public workspace and you're using a public API, if you put things in this initial value, people can unmask what's there and they'll actually see it. And so what we want to do is we want to paste it only in the current value field. Now it'll mask it here because you've made it secret, so people won't see it. So if you just click on the current value field and just paste it in there, then it'll paste in your access token there. And it'll just be all dots. We won't see it. And
don't press on the little eye icon. Okay.
That'll expose it. And then make sure you click on the save icon right above there. So now we've got that access token. So what we can do is we can go back to the collection.
Okay.
And at the very top, if you click on the Netlify API documentation line again, what we can see here is under the authorization tab that we're currently looking at, we see it's set to OAuth 2, so we want that to stay the same. But the access token down a little bit, it's looking for available tokens and it's looking for a name. So scroll down just a little bit here. So this is actually looking for like callbacks and so on. But because you've made this access token, I think where it says underneath where it says available tokens, it looks like there's a field in here to actually enter an access token. So what we can do here is we can actually use that environment variable. So we use handlebars. So you can just do two curly brackets, braces, and then whatever you called your environment variable. You will need to save that change. Well, actually, it looks like it already saved that change. So you should be okay. But what we want to do now is up in the top right corner where it says no environment is we want to pick that Netlify environment that you made. And now you notice that the color, if you can discern between red and orange, it actually went from a red color to an orange color. And if you hover over it now, it should show that it's coming from an environment. It's still masked, so no one can see it and so on. But now we can see that that value is going to come in from your environment. So
that's a really nice feature of working with something like this, because it's all cool until you're like, oh wait, we need to authorize, and it's like, oh yeah.
Now what we can see here under the configure new token is if you want to walk through, like if you want to manually set up the whole process of here's how we log in, here's the callback or whatever, to actually go through the whole OAuth procedure, to actually, put in a client ID, put in a secret and so on, to actually programmatically get that bearer token. That's basically what this bottom section is for. But because Netlify will actually allow you to just go get your own personal access token, we can just set it above. We don't have to set any of this bottom part here at all, looks like.
Okay, cool.
Let's go back over to the collection over on the left side, and let's go pull up the list of sites. So let's scroll down to the sites folder. And it looks like there's a get list sites. Let's close up that one. And let's just do that get call. Let's just send this over. Let's see what happens over here. So we got an empty list. But we got a success. So that tells us that the bearer token worked out okay. The base URL that we're trying to hit was okay. Now the name and the filter values, we're pulling these out because they were part of the Open API specification, but that might not actually, we might be unnecessarily filtering things here. So what we can do is we can shut off these parameters for now on the left side, just undo those check marks. Let's send that over again, because it might have been like search parameters here. So now we actually see the sites that were coming in. If you set the name and the filter and so on, it looks like your API is allowing you to do like some sort of search filtering to say like, only go find me the sites that have to do with like Nikki T Online or, whatever. It looks like it's going to filter those out.
I think what that is if I just go to Netlify. Yeah, okay. There's a filter here. So there's like Nick's team. I wonder if it's filtering on the team or if it's just actually then you can have more than one team. Maybe that's what the part of the filtering. I'm not sure because I've never actually used these APIs, so this is brand new to me.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Well, I mean, we got responses here. So the other thing that we can do inside that response is if you scroll back up to line 2, over on the left side where you see the 2, we actually collapse things very similar to most code editors. So we can actually collapse all of these. And so we actually see you've got a number of sites in here that are coming up, and they've all got like, the interesting generated names like line 344, where it's like auto-generating names and things like that on the Netlify side of things. But now we can see that we've at least got like an array of these objects coming in, and what can we go do with that? We could actually go write some test code and say, let's go get a list of all these names or the custom domains or something like that and do something with those bits of information. And so what we can do is under the address bar where we have, get base URL sites, you'll see a tests tab. And this is where a lot of the magic and the most popular part of Postman happens. We can write some JavaScript code in here to go do something with that response body that comes back. So what we can do here is on the right side of where you're going to type in the JavaScript, we've actually got a whole bunch of snippet code, and this will actually go in and auto-generate some code for us. So what we can do is we can scroll down in here and we can look for a snippet of code that looks for a 200 success. So over on the side where it says get an environment variable, get a global variable, get a variable, and so on the right side. We'll scroll down in there until we see code is 200. We don't want to do anything with this response unless we get a 200. So what we've got now is just a quick JavaScript block that says, as Postman, go run this test. And the first string where it says status code is 200, this is just the name of the test. Then we give it a JavaScript function that says, what do we want to do? The pm.response is basically looking at the response object that comes back. We're basically doing behavior-driven development in Chai at this point. So if you're familiar with JavaScript and Chai, then we've got access to all of its expectations and assertions and all the matches. And so what we can do is after line 2, basically anywhere that we have like a pm.response.to or expect, and so anytime any of those fail, we're going to stop running any of their code. And so by having line number 2 in there, if we don't have a 200, don't do anything else. And so,
gotcha.
So after this line, because this response succeeded and we got a 200, now we can programmatically do something else. So what we want to do is let's make a JavaScript variable here that's going to go get a list of all of our sites. Well, actually, let's do const data to begin with. And we're going to go grab like all of the JSON data that we get back here. So we do const data equals pm.response.json.
Okay, it's like the fetch API, I guess.
Yep. And so what this is going to do is it's basically going to unpack the JSON response and now give us a data structure. So data is now going to be the full structure of that data. Because it looked like we were getting an array of objects, now we can do like a .map or a .for each or something like that, where we can now iteratively go through each of these sites and do something with it.
Okay, got it. One question I have is the response.json, we don't have to await it because at this point, like the asynchronous stuff already happened. So we're just saying, get me the payload. We
already have the response at this point. There's nothing else to wait for. The RESTful API has given us some data, and now we're just going to do something with that data. The only time that you would have to do an await here is you can actually tell the test code here, like, hey, I want to go run another request. Let's say for each of these sites, we wanted to go do something else. Like for each of our sites, we wanted to go fetch a deployment key or something like that. Then we would have to do like an async await sort of arrangement where for each one of these that we're cycling through, we want to go make another call and wait for that to come back before we process the next thing. Otherwise, it blasts a whole bunch of stuff out in parallel, and that has performance implications on your machine and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, gotcha.
If we go unpack one of these objects that we get back here at the bottom, it looks like we have things like an ID and a site ID and a plan. So these will all be like attributes now. So we'll have like site.name and site.custom domain and things like that. We could console log these out. Down in the bottom left corner, we see there's a console button there. And this is actually like a console log, or where you would see your console log popping up. So if we go and run this request now, we'll see the console log fill up with all of these names.
This is nice to be able to just start messing around with stuff right in the request. I like that. That's nice.
And it's really helpful too for debugging if you're a little bit unsure about what to do in JavaScript, or, you think you've got an idea, like, let's give this a try. Aside from like the fact that this is actually calling the real API and getting data back every time, it will allow you to kind of go back and test that things are working the way that you expect, and you can manipulate the data and do other interesting stuff with that data if you need. For example, if there was some billing information or something in here and you wanted to find out like which of my sites are about to be shut off because I didn't pay the bill or something like that. Like if there was some sort of attribute in here, like state of current or something, like I want to go find all of the non-current sites, like which of my sites are actually online or not. If there were attributes around there, then you could use this kind of JavaScript code to say, go figure out what state these things are in, and then you can console log it or something. You can do some really interesting stuff with that.
Yeah, I'm seeing here like there's screenshot URLs, like when you're in the dashboard, you could essentially kind of enhance things, or like just have like some kind of reporting thing if you want to.
Well, let's go build a portfolio site using Postman. Let's go do that on the fly. New idea, just kind of showed up in my brain. My brain said, let's go do this thing. So what we want to do is down on the bottom where we see the response, we see the pretty and raw and preview, but there's also a visualize tab. And the visualize tab will allow us to build something with output inside of Postman. So what we want to do is we're going to go grab all those screenshots and we're going to go build a little portfolio for all of these. And then we also want to figure out like, how can we link over to the website or something from there? So we may need a few other bits of information from that response. So let's go back to the pretty view for now. And let's go build a visualizer with this data and figure out like, how do we get like the URL and then the screenshot? And then how do we make like a running portfolio of these screenshots where if you click on it, it'll actually go over to that web page for us.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it looks like we could use URL, which is because we have deploy previews. That's the deploy URL. Sorry, where is it? The deploy URL is like, well, that could be the final one, but that's where it last deployed to because we have deploy previews as well. It's not the production URL. This is the production URL from what I can tell.
Gotcha. So what we'll want to do here is we want to build like a custom data structure of the screenshot and, you know, whichever link we want to use to actually link over to the site. So above line 6, let's define a new data structure, and we'll just call it like sites or something like that. We probably won't want this to be constant because we are gonna change this. So we'll just do like a var or a let or something, and we'll just define this as an empty array or something for now.
Yeah.
Cool. So now inside this map, what we can do is we can append to that sites array another little object that we're going to kind of build on the fly as part of this mapping. So we're going to map over each of the sites. And then for each of these sites, we're going to go add to our sites. What we can do here, well, instead of doing return, we can keep some console logging because we may need to check some stuff. What a return would do here is if we were going to capture this data on line 7, so we could say like let sites equal data.map.
Yeah, I was going to do that.
Something like that.
Wait till you were.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in refactoring mode. Sorry.
No worries. I like to build it and then refactor it. We're steps ahead of each other. Let's put a return in here where we return an object, and we're gonna need a couple of attributes in here. So what are we gonna need? We're gonna need like an attribute called screenshot, and we're gonna need an attribute for like the domain or the site or something like that.
I think just the URL. That's what was. I can get the domain too if not. No, there's no. This is just a test site, so I don't have a custom domain. So the domain is netlify.app here. My own blog's deployed here, so there would probably be a custom domain.
Right. So that's where we might, instead of just grabbing those individual bits and pieces on line 5 like you're doing, is we could programmatically inside this block say, if this thing is set, use that. If not, use this other one instead. So if I have domain, use custom domain. If not, use the deploy URL or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Well, actually, actually, let's see if I look down. I've got a bunch of sites here. Can I leave the test like that for a second? Can we run it?
Sure can. Yeah.
Let's just do I'm wondering how I can filter on well, we should probably use filter.
We have a filter parameter. We just have to figure out how do we use that filter parameter. So you might have to go look at some documentation, but let's filter.
I'm gonna try for fun just to see if this actually does it, but. Okay, no, it does not. Okay, well, actually, let me just do it. Oh shit, I have a bunch of stuff in here. Okay, this is my actual site. So the custom domain, and then I have a bunch of aliases.
So it looks like there's a name parameter that we could send. So let's try that. When we send over the request, let's click on name up above.
Yeah.
And let's search for, I'm developer. Let's send that over. Let's see if that filters that down any less.
Okay, that's what it is. So it's the name of the project in Netlify.
In Netlify? Okay.
Yeah.
And it looks like you got a bunch of domain aliases and so on. Hey, you got a lot of stuff on there. Cool. Hopefully you're not showing us any domains that we didn't want to see.
Yeah, shadydomain.com.
Well, what we did see was a little pop-up saying like, hey, your test didn't run properly. It's because we kind of left our script unfinished. But we can see that the test results has a dot. If you can discern the color red, you see test results has a red dot, and the test tab up above has another red dot. And that lets us know that our JavaScript code didn't work. So we can go back to our test code and so let's go back to the body down below so we can actually see the results. And then we can figure out from here, like, what do we want to use to build this sort of custom portfolio?
Okay, yeah. I just keep thinking, is there anything that I'm not supposed to show in here that's like site, but it seems to be fine. There's the custom domain, and then but it still shows the URL. So I think we can probably just grab the URL in general. Let's just start off maybe with the URL and the screenshot, and then I honestly can't remember how many sites I have with custom domains, but we could do that after, and that would get because a lot of these without a custom domain are just me testing stuff typically.
Yeah.
I guess we could start like this just to build the screenshot with the URL.
Yeah. And then it looks like for our return, then we'll want to kind of package this up to where our map is just returning an array of these objects. I'll let you figure that out. So let's console log after line 9. Let's console log what sites actually holds afterwards. So once this map finishes, what's in sites? So let's do a console log sites, and then we'll go run this request again. and then we'll
Yeah.
pull up our console and see what kind of.
Yeah. Just gonna remove that filter. Okay.
Sure.
So let's open this up. Let's clear this. Okay. Let's see what's going on. Okay. Return sites.
Like return data. I don't see anything in the console log though.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
So it makes me wonder if can we put a string in front of line 11 where you console log sites? Can we add a string in there and just say like
Oh yeah,
sites or something?
I think it's because the second argument has to be the object, I think, but it should typically.
But if it's empty, then we don't see anything being console logged.
Yeah. No, gotcha. Okay,
so in this case, we actually don't see anything from there. So it makes me think that, and we can actually see the test result 0 of 1 down at the bottom. So that tells us that something failed in there. So site is not defined.
Site. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what it is.
So we can take out line 6. Yeah. So that's one gotcha here is looking at the console log. You're like, why didn't that work? It's not actually showing us in the console down here that, this particular line of your JavaScript failed. So,
okay,
cool. So now it looks like we're getting some data in here, but it looks like we're getting nulls because something maybe didn't have that custom thing, but we're also only getting, it looks like an array of just the screenshots. So we're not actually getting the array of objects like we thought we should be, because we want to get the screenshot and the domain. So we're gonna have to tweak our return value here. So when we may have to give these attribute names as part of what you're building in here.
Oh, okay. I think it might not be supporting newer JavaScript. That's why.
Okay.
Because this is a shorter way to do
objects.
Call it. Yeah. I forget the name of it. Okay. I got give me 2 seconds.
Yep, no worries.
Screenshot, or I copy pasted the wrong. Okay. So I'm just explicitly doing both here, but it does look like the URL was null. I just want to make sure you had that right URL. So let's try this then.
Okay. And then we'll scroll down on that console log and see what we get down at the bottom here now.
Okay,
so now we have,
now we go.
All right, so let's expand this out and let's expand just any one of these. Yep, okay. Cool. So now we have the screenshot and we have the URL. Now, sometimes that screenshot URL was empty. I wonder if we could filter those out. Like if we have one or the other, then we don't want to necessarily do that. That could be where we do a little bit of logic in here around, like put in a placeholder screenshot URL. Like if there isn't one, then we're going to set the screenshot URL to be this default. Or if we don't have a URL, we're going to set it to this default URL or something like that. Yeah,
no, for sure. Keep it simple here.
And we could just go find like some random cat image or something like that.
All right, just copy this. So now if I run this, we should get down here.
Yep. So we occasionally get some cats in here, so that'll be fine.
Yeah.
So now that we have that data structure defined, now we could actually go build a template and go build like a little portfolio site right inside of here. Now that preview is the preview of the JSON data, but we're going to go build out the visualizer here. So what we have to do is down at the bottom of the code, we have to do a little bit more work in here.
In the preview section or?
No, so we'll stay on the pretty view here for a moment. So we'll click back on the pretty button, but down on after line 11 now. So now that we know that our sites array is holding all the data, now we have to define a template that we're going to go build. So let's just make a new var and we'll just call it template. And what we want to do here is we want to basically build out like the structure of what we want our portfolio to look like here. So this is just going to be some HTML code. So we can just set this to like a backtick where we do like an HTML table or something like that. We could maybe do some divs or something instead of tables if you want to do like floating divs or something like that. That would be fine too.
I'll just keep it simple. I'll do a flex here. Just flex gap. That should be okay. And then they'll just kind of float beside each other.
Okay. So inside this div now, what we want to do is we want to use handlebars syntax in here. So we're going to do, actually, we'll need to do this before the div because we're going to build this div for each of our results. Okay. So between lines 12 and 13, we're going to do a set of handlebar, which is the 2 curly braces. And we're going to say 2 curly braces and then hash each space response. And then after the div, we'll close the each. I always forget to do this, so I like to make that the very first thing that I do here. It's 2 curly braces and then just slash each.
No hash?
No, just a slash in there. That's all we need. And then what we want to do inside the div is we basically want to build out like the anchor tag and the image tag and so on.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the handlebars variables here are going to be the attribute names. So in this case, we have screenshot URL and URL.
Okay.
So the screenshot URL, yeah, and so we'll just put this in 2 curly braces as well. So where you have screenshot URL in your image source, we need to put the 2 curly braces around the variable name.
My website's in 11 and it uses nunchucks, which is similar. But I used to do handlebars, but it's been a while. Yeah, cool.
The nunchucks, is that what they're calling the percent sign these days?
Yeah, it looks pretty much like, I'm not honestly sure what's different between that and handlebars actually.
So we're not going to do a div for each one?
No, you won't need to, because like it'll make it fit, because the anchor can be like the div. I'm just using my front end stuff here.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Well, now that we have that template defined, now we need to tell Postman to actually then go use that template with our data structure. So after line 18, so we're not quite ready for the visualizer yet, but after line 18, we're going to do pm.visualizer. So PM is the built-in Postman library. And inside the visualizer here, we need to do .set, because we're going to set our visualizer. And the first parameter here is the name of the template, basically, that we just built. So it'll just be template.
Okay.
And then inside of here, we need an object. And this object has an attribute called response. And you'll need to actually build this as an object. So it'll need to have curly braces around it.
Okay, gotcha.
And so we'll just say response : and then sites, for example. And so what we did inside our template is we're basically saying for each response, and that's where we're looking at the attribute name on line 20 of the word response. It's basically saying for each thing that I find in an array, so response is expecting an array. And so if you want to call it something other than response, you could say each site. Then down on line 20, instead of the word response, you'd say site or something like that.
Gotcha.
So at this point, we should be ready to go with our visualizer. We will need, no, I think we're good there. So let's go ahead and send this over. So we won't be able to visualize anything yet because we have to actually send the request. So let's do a send.
Okay.
And there's your screenshots.
Okay. Oh, that's a screenshot. I thought that was HTML for a second. Okay.
Yeah. So it looks like it maybe only found one.
No, they're sideways.
I'll put them all sideways. There we go. Yeah, we might want like a break tag or something in between them, or like a list element or something like that. Someone was asking in chat, is Postman like an IDE now or what? Yeah, basically it's a full platform now that you can write all kinds of interesting code and do things with responses. In this case, you can build out visualizers and so on. And we've seen some really neat things come out of these visualizers around, go programmatically, draw like interactive maps. You can pull in external JavaScript libraries for, like D3 and so on to say like, hey, here's a list of latitude, longitude points, go plot them on a map and like see where things are on a map based on the results that you get back from calling an API like this. There's all kinds of really interesting stuff that we can do here.
Okay, I'm just gonna make them a little smaller, just so. They might be skewed, but it's just more so folks.
Well, here's a tip: if you only set the width, it may auto set the height based on the ratio.
Oh yeah. All right, it's a little tiny, but okay. All right, so we got stuff here, and if I click on them. Oh no!
So it's not actually clickable inside.
No, it's clickable. I had to do open link in new tab, so maybe it's trying to open it in there. I'm not sure what's going on. But this is before you continue. This is pretty cool. This is kind of like, a neat way to pull in your data. We'll test your data, pull in your data, and then you're just like the tab says visualize. It's kind of neat to put things out there like that.
It's one way that you can kind of definitely take a look at the data. And the other thing too is you want to make sure that you save your work in here too. So we'll hit that save button just so we don't lose that change. But what's often used inside of Postman is when I get, I'm going to call this API, I need to do something with that data. I need to crunch that data a little bit so that I can then pass that data off to another request to do something and take that as input and basically to go use the output from one request as input to another, where maybe you need like only a few bits of that information. And so this is where you can write the JavaScript code in here from one request saying, go grab this, maybe store it in an environment variable or store it in a collection variable. The collection is the Netlify API documentation. That's our whole collection. So you can save it as a collection variable. You can just save it as a very short-lived variable in between requests as well. But we could basically save this data now in the environment, and then we could tell this request, hey, go call this request next. and pass in that data to do something interesting. So if you need to go from
Okay.
one API call to the next and pass data in between, this is where you would get into writing this test code. Now, on
Okay.
the subsequent request that we would call, just as an example, or we see the test code happening. Next to that, we see a tab called pre-request script. This is a preprocessor. And so if you need to go get some environment variable and pre-process it in some way before
Okay.
calling the request, then go chunk up some data or go fetch some data or something ahead of time. And so the pre-request
Okay.
happens before the request gets called, and the test code happens after the request gets called. And so we allow
Okay.
you to
Gotcha.
run code before and after the request here.
Okay.
So yeah, lots
No,
of
that's
interesting
really
stuff.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like you said it was chai here, right? I mean, they're all
Yeah, it's
pretty
using a chai library.
similar. Chai, there's like chai, mocha. Jest is based off of, what is it? Was it based off?
Is
No,
it
it wasn't based
enzyme or
off
something?
mocha. No, jasmine. They're based
Or
off
jasmine?
teas
Yeah,
or
yeah.
coffees. It's tea or coffee if you're testing in
Yeah.
JavaScript.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool. And then so we showed earlier, like we've got all these snippets down the right side where you can say like, make sure that my status code is this or that. There's a
Yeah.
snippet in here that says like go make another request. And so this is where like as soon as this request is done, we can like crunch some data and then we can say now go call this other request. And it's like a whole JavaScript fetch call where you can say
Okay.
like, hey, go, now take this data and like go do something else. Meanwhile, we built up this cool little visualizer where on the fly, we just built you a portfolio website. Now
Yeah.
you could go in and you could actually grab that HTML and be like, here's my portfolio site. And you could,
Yeah.
ooh, this would be an interesting one to actually try if we had thought through this ahead of time, is what if we told the Netlify API, now go create a site for me. Here's the
Okay.
HTML I want to push to the site. And now
Yeah.
when I make the call to list out my sites, it goes and generates a portfolio site and pushes all those screenshots up for me. Now you use Postman to actually literally go build yourself a portfolio website.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And I saw something neat in here just because I was looking at the data. So we have build settings. This is just stuff within Netlify, but you could, based on some of the commands, like here Nux, that's a S project. So you could basically say, here's my Vue projects, here's my Next.js or my
Yeah.
Gatsby or
Yeah, you could
Remix site.
categorize them or something. Yep.
Obviously, it's whatever's in the data, but it's pretty neat. And this feels like pretty comfortable and not intimidating. I am comfortable live coding, but I mean, like the UI and stuff, it seems pretty straightforward. It's not like here's a million buttons. What do I do
Right.
to get a request? So
Yeah.
no, it's really cool.
But having those snippets is really helpful too, as far as like how do I do something in Postman? How do I use all the different
Yeah.
Postman APIs and things like that? Like, you like we've got all the assertions and expectations for Chai built in, but things like the visualizer, we don't really have a snippet for that. And so you've got to go look up our documentation for how to go build a visualizer. But that would be one way of building out, like, if you're a junior dev and you're trying to get noticed for a job, for example. Now you can go into Netlify, go grab all these things because you've been, maybe you've been putting all of your projects up on Netlify. Now you can go grab all of that. Now you've got all the HTML you need to start shaping up an actual portfolio site to then, show prospective, employers. So I like your idea too of could we group these up in some way, group them up by the type of project or, like if there was some other way of like extracting that from that response data that we initially got to go figure out like what kind of project was this. These are all my React projects. These are all my Vue projects. So if you're trying to show somebody like, hey, here's my experience with React. Now you can, go build this visualizer. Hey, go hit this button in Postman and go look at the visualizer and you'll see all my React projects. And it just shows that you've done a little bit deeper exploration into tech by using a tool like Postman, because a lot of companies are starting to use Postman now. We're seeing quite a huge lift in adoption of using Postman for more than just fetching an API and like testing that it works, but actually doing something with that data. Now it shows like, hey, I've used Postman enough to go do something with that data. That can make you really stand out too as a job applicant.
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm gonna throw it out there, but if you made, because this is all web tech here, if you were to make this, because I know there's different tiers, like I imagine there's a paid tier for team and stuff, but if you could box that into a Visual Studio Code extension, winner, chicken dinner, I think. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
It's super useful in the browser, don't get me wrong, but I'm just thinking, I'm just kind of thinking of I'm just going on tangents here, but I think that
No,
could be
it's all good.
interesting.
Unfortunately, I can't share like what's coming down the pipeline, but we have some really interesting
Yeah.
stuff coming up in our next major release that will make developers' lives even easier than it already is.
No, this is awesome. Have we gone through pretty much most of the things? Okay, so the pretty view, the raw view is just like it's the JSON, not
This is just
formatted.
a raw string that came back. Yeah. And the
Yeah,
preview mode is like an HTML version of it. So like if you were to pull up that in your
yeah,
browser and your browser didn't understand that this was JSON data where it's going to do the color syntax rendering, this is
yeah.
what it would look like in your browser. The visualize is basically how you're building a visualizer for that data. So the first
Yeah.
three buttons here are basically Postman interpreting that response data that came back from calling that API. So the pretty
Okay,
view
cool,
is
cool.
where we're trying to recognize like, oh, this looks like HTML, this looks like JSON, and so on.
I like some of this information because normally, like, if I'm looking at requests and stuff, if I'm just debugging in my browser, like, I go to the network tab and then I have
Mhm.
to check. But it's nice seeing this information right away. Like, it's 200. How fast was it? You're getting.
Yeah.
It looks like you're getting a breakdown here. That's really nice having that in there.
Yeah, the timings are really helpful for profiling data. So if you're on a team and you're building an API and you're like, why is this API slow? You can hover over that timer and it'll
Yeah.
show you kind of like where some of these things were, taking a little bit of time. So
So we talked about collections. We went to the environment. I know we won't be able to get to all this stuff probably, but
yeah.
the APIs here briefly, that's you creating an API, it seems.
Yeah, so this is where companies can go in and build an API. If we go back in the search at the very top in the search bar, if we go look at the Netlify again
Yeah.
and pull up just the Netlify from API Evangelist,
Yeah.
if we actually click on the APIs button here, this is basically the API that
Oh,
Postman
okay.
was able to go grab that open API spec. And this is what the producer side of this actually looks like. Like, how do we go produce an API from this? So if you click on the word draft, and then from
Okay.
here, you can go into the definition tab. And the definition tab here at the top, you go to definition. This is basically your open
Okay.
API spec. In this case, it's Swagger 2.0.
Yeah.
So, we were able to find like a Swagger version of your API at this point. So if you have like a newer version, and Open API is basically like Swagger version 3. So if your
Yeah.
team has an Open API or a Swagger spec, you can actually import that directly into Postman. And now as a team, you can produce your API inside of here as well. The other interesting thing is over on the right edge, you'll see a list of
Yeah.
icons. The second
Yeah.
one down, no, over on the very right edge.
Oh, yeah. So my bad.
So the third one down actually will be a code generator. And we actually, it's only going to do it for OpenAPI 3. So OpenAPI 3 will actually generate some server-side code. So if you define your API inside of Postman, we'll actually start generating some server-side code for your team to get started writing their code.
Uh,
It's currently beta right now, but we do Java, Go, JavaScript, and Python. And we'll actually generate some server-side code. Now, the documentation
okay.
side will generate like the client-side code. Like, here's how, as a client, you can go consume this API. But now we're also generating server-side code as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that can
we're
definitely speed things up, like code gen for the win.
from a productivity point of view. Yeah, we're trying to make devs as productive as we can with some of the tooling in here.
Okay, cool. No, this is super interesting.
We'll talk about mock servers. So this is where, like, as part of a team can be really helpful. And this is actually a workshop that I run where if you've got like a front end team and a back end team and you're trying to work together on like a full stack project of some kind, you can basically, you can build a collection of requests for your back end API, and you can save responses from that and then go build a mock server using those responses. And then your front end team can go build against the mock server while your back end team is actually sort of hashing out like what we actually need to go build to actually respond with real data. And so now your front end team can be up and running by building out that mock server. The mock server, though, requires that you have saved examples for each of the requests. And any requests that don't have a saved example response, it won't actually set up a mock for. But let's go back to collections real quick. On the left side. Yep. And let's expand this. Let's go back down to where we're getting the list of sites.
Yeah.
So we notice there's an arrow next to the get list sites. If we click on that arrow, we actually see that there's some stored responses already for an error condition and an OK condition.
Okay.
Now, in this case, the Open API spec said message is going to be a string and code's going to be a number. And so we just kind of populate this with like garbage data because we don't know what your message string is actually going to look like. And we don't know what that integer value is actually going to look like. But we do know what your expectation for an OK status is going to look like. It's going to be an array of these objects. And then we just kind of populate it with whatever. But this is where now your front end team could actually go spin up a mock server and say, okay, when I call this endpoint to go get my list of sites, this is the response that comes back, and here's how we can parse it, similar to what we just did in that JavaScript code, where we can then say, okay, well, now I can go build my front end for consuming this API. Meanwhile, the backend team can actually go build out the API. And so as you define it inside of Postman, and you make these saved examples, now you can spin up a mock server, and now all of your teams are way more productive. And your front end team is not sitting there twiddling their thumbs while your back end team is scrambling to try to get their API done in a hurry.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I've created a mock server in the past, like when doing front end, but it's more just like we talked to the team, we agreed on what the contract was, and like assumed it wasn't, well, if it changed, we obviously change course a bit, but it's kind of nice where this is kind of like a central place where it's just shared and the mock servers.
Yeah, it's a huge productivity boost for folks that are working on, especially cross-functional teams. And then when you're getting into the monitors, that's more for the DevOps side of it. Like, is the API that we built, like, is that up and running all the time? But you can also run monitors as webhooks. So if you're doing event-driven development, the monitors can basically get triggered when an event happens. You can have it run a monitor, which tells it to go run a collection. So if a particular event happens, you can then have it actually go run a collection request to say, like, hey, I added a new site, therefore go rebuild that portfolio site and like redeploy that to Netlify or whatever. You can do all that kind of stuff right inside of Postman now. Flows is kind of a visual programming tool. So if people want to get into more of a no code, low code, it's more of a low code kind of situation. But if you click on create flow just real quick, it's basically a visual Oh, sorry. I think you have to be on a team plan for, I think it's a paid. Well, actually, no, it should be available on public plans, but it's a visual programming tool basically where you can like drop blocks in here and sort of chain them. Like, I want to call this one, and then I want to call this one, and then I want to grab the response out of this one and feed that as input on the next one. And so it alleviates having to write a lot of that JavaScript code that we did. We have some visual programming tools in there for some of that. So yeah, we got quite a lot of stuff in Postman, and like I said, our next major version that's coming out later this year is going to have some really neat changes in here as well. So all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. No, well, we could wrap up here. And do you want to talk a bit about interviewing? Maybe I know this is something you're super interested in. Well, you have your own stream.
Love nerding out on that.
Yeah, I'll drop a link to your website. So there's the tech interview guide. Is that where you typically direct people to? I mean, you have your stream as well, but okay.
Yeah, so you can find all the information over on the website. So the website is basically a collection of advice that I've been giving out for years and years around, how do you interview? Like, how do you get ready for interviews? How do you research companies where you want to go apply for a job? How do you get through the interview? How do you negotiate? All that kind of stuff. And so my live stream is kind of a Q&A, ask me anything kind of format, but I also do live resume reviews and LinkedIn reviews and things like that to really figure out, like, how are you positioning yourself for a particular kind of job. And then from there, just helping people out with ideas around like career advancement and so on. So I've been in the tech industry a long time, but I've also been an engineering manager doing hiring. I've also been a director of engineering, building up big teams and so on. I've got a lot of that perspective, but I also love having people on my stream where we can hear their perspectives as well. And so through most of August into September, we're going to be having guests on the stream pretty much every Sunday, and then occasional Thursday nights where we're just going to hear other people's perspectives. We just had Tiffany Jaksha on the stream where we did a whole bunch of resume reviews together, where it's interesting hearing two different engineering managers talk about like what they like or don't like on a resume. Do you put the skills block at the top? Do you put it at the bottom? Do you put education at the top? Do you put education at the bottom? Like, how do you build a resume? And just hearing different perspectives on that, because you should never just listen to one person's advice on that stuff. You should definitely have lots of perspectives there. And so I like having people on my stream just to hear their perspectives and ideas as well. And then all of my streams I put up on YouTube later. So you can find all that stuff over on Tech Interview Guide. I've also got a daily email series that you can subscribe to, which is just, these are the top interview questions, but I don't teach you how to answer them. What I do
Okay.
instead is I explore, this is why we ask you this question in the first place. So
Okay.
from a hiring manager's perspective, like, what do I hope you're going to say? Like, is this an
Yeah.
opinion question? Am I asking about your experience with a thing? Like, how do you break that question down a little bit and understand why we ask you that kind of question? Someone asked in
Yeah.
chat, do I like leak code on the resume? No, not really. It's not personally very helpful. Like if you study leak
Yeah.
code, that's fine. But knowing like, oh, I'm in the top 100 of leak code, that just tells me you got a lot of time to spend on leak code. But it doesn't practically tell me that you know how to go consume an API and go do something practical with that data, or you know
Yeah.
how to go build a functional website. It just tells me that you're really good at algorithmic thinking. And so for my particular company, that wouldn't be helpful. For a major company like a FANG company where they're going to be interviewing you on leak code style problems, then yes, it would be actually pretty helpful for them to see that you've been really grinding on leak code. But I think at the same time, you can grind a little smarter on leak code
Yeah.
by understanding like what is the strategy of the problem and being able to apply a strategy and knowing
Hmm.
that I understand why I do depth first search a particular way. I understand why to do this or that in a particular way. I think that's more helpful than just saying like, oh yeah, I've done 1,000 problems on leak code, because
Yeah.
I can go grind problems too, but if I'm not actually learning anything by grinding that much, then all I'm really doing is exercising my mental acumen around like I can go see a problem and I can come up with a solution. But if you're not learning like how to go build those solutions in the first place, is that really as
Yeah.
helpful on the job when you've got to go call APIs and you've got to go like manipulate data and like, crunch over data and stuff like that. And there is some of that in these leak code problems where you've got a data structure that you have to iterate over in some way, but really understanding like, but how do you optimize your memory performance? How do you optimize your timing performance? Leak code doesn't really give you that. Like it does tell you like, oh, your code was faster than so many people, but
Yeah.
it doesn't offer you suggestions on here's how to make it even better. Here's how to minimize that memory footprint a little bit more. Here's how to speed it up. They don't give you that. So I think that is probably more helpful for interviews than just grinding on leak code, is understanding like how to improve it and what to optimize and when to optimize and things like that.
And I think too, like what we were talking about for how we built all that out with Postman. I think it's one thing to say like if we're speaking like front end, like I created a website. It's a lot more if you say like, well, I created the website, I deployed it, I have a GitHub
Mm,
action that does, you know what I mean? Like it's, even if
yeah.
you're trying to land your first job, that already shows so much more than just like, hey, I did the, because I know a lot of people tend to do the same portfolio projects from what I've seen at least. I mean, my first job was like 2002, so it's been forever. But so like make it stand out differently by like add a twist to
Mm.
it. Like what
Yeah,
problems
to stand
into.
out. If your portfolio looks the same as everybody else's, you're not going to stand out. You have to do something a little bit different to catch their eye. And this is why I tell people on my channel all the time, like you have to figure out what's important to that company, because your
Yeah.
application, your resume, if you're going to do a cover letter, you have to tell them why you matter to them. They need to see in a hurry, like what value are you bringing to my company or potentially bringing to my
Hmm.
company? You have to really entice me like, oh, I want to hire Nick because Nick had that impact at that job, or had this particular impact on this particular project. I want to hire Nick now to have that impact here. That's what's going to stand out, as opposed to, these are all the sites that I made. If you can
Yeah.
specify, this is what I learned, this is the impact that it had. Like when I learned this thing, I now realize like how to deploy code, 10% faster, or, by utilizing CI/CD pipeline, I'm catching more errors. And so, I've had zero downtime in all of my sites over the past 6 months. Like showing
Yeah.
that kind of impact, that's what's going to stand out on these applications and to your resumes and things like that, for when a
Yeah.
company's looking over those kinds of skills, more than just, yeah, I've been doing tons of grinding on leak code.
No, for sure. And like, I mean, I'm a big fan of open source. It's helped me, land the last couple jobs. I'm a big fan of the learning in public. I know it's difficult for some people sometimes, but it's like, learning in public doesn't mean you have to be streaming like we're doing right now. It could be just
Mm,
writing blog posts, like anything, just putting something out
yeah.
there, and it's like, I remember when I started blogging, it's like, why why am I going to blog about this? 500 other people already blogged about this, but and many people say this, and it's true though. Like there might be like a set of people that read your blog post and then, like it clicks for them because just the way you wrote it and
the way you explain
even
it, sure.
yeah, and like not only that, it's like you and me have been in the industry for a while. Like we're not new to the industry, so the way I would write something versus somebody who's just starting out, like probably the way they write it would most likely, I mean, make it click for people that are starting out too, and so there's just so many things that I don't know. I honestly can't think of anything really negative about doing stuff in public. Yes, there's the, oh no, what if people see my terrible code or like my blog post is terrible. If you can get past that, then I think you're golden.
I think a lot of hiring managers like to see that progression though. They want to know, are you just churning and doing the same thing day in, day out, or are you actually progressing in your skill? And by seeing a string of blog posts of, this is how I got started with React, and this is what I've learned next on React, and this is how I'm applying that on my next React project, they see that progression. That stands out more to them because they can see that you're growing, as opposed to here's another React project that I made. It's like, but what are you doing different? What did you learn that you're applying differently? I often tell people, like, if your resume says like, oh, I've got 5 years experience, is like, well, do you have 5 years of progressive experience, or have you been doing the same thing every year for 5 years? Because then really you've got 1 year of experience 5 times, as opposed to 5 years of like progressing in your skill. And that's really what's going to stand out, as well as like showing that progression and that growth. That's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I've definitely worked with a few people where it's like they've been in the industry forever, but it's just been flat, and it's like, but at the same time, they might just be happy with just that, personally, I'm not. I always want to keep learning, and I want to just get better.
Keep learning. I mean, that's what I love about tech, is you have to keep learning, because you're going to get stale in a hurry. And Parasocial made a great comment in chat. It makes you look like you actually did something as opposed to just copying a tutorial. I actually interviewed someone, they applied for a job, and I looked at their resume, and they were like, I know like 20 different programming languages and 30 different frameworks and like all these different databases. And I'm looking through all this experience going, wow, this person's been in the industry as long as me. They graduated like 2 years prior. I'm like, there's no way you have that much depth of experience in all of these things. Like literally they were just going through tutorials and like, oh yeah, I did a to-do list tutorial and I did the hello world tutorial. It's like, well, then you don't actually know these technologies. And so that's where, again, we want to see that progression and not just like a snapshot of like, everyone has done like a Magic 8-Ball kind of app, and everybody's done where are me and my friends going to have lunch? Like there's merit in those projects because you can learn. And so I think using those as learning tools is good. But I think what's really going to stand out on those resumes and applications is like, show me something novel that you've done. Come up with like an interesting idea, like a real world kind of thing that you can go solve and go do some interesting stuff with like civic tech data or something, or some sort of open source project or something where, what you do has value to others, as opposed to just grinding the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no, you're making me laugh when you were mentioning that person that knew all those things, because I remember when I was trying to land my first job, because the first job is hard to land. I caught a break. Somebody I played rugby with just said, hey, are you still looking for work? And like, after a year of searching, it was just having a beer with one of my teammates, and he's, hey, why don't you just come work here? So definitely grateful for that. Cool. But prior to that, I was like, okay, I need to learn all the languages. I became the master of print hello world in like all these languages, and I'm like, I know Java now. I did static main print hello world or whatever, and it's like, clearly I did not, but it was, and I was just spreading myself too thin too. And then it's like and then I just kind of hunkered down and like JavaScript and C# because I did that prior to doing front end. That's basically what I stuck to. And you get better at those things. I mean, it's definitely good to branch out too, but it's good to, I don't want to say expert, but it's you want to be in a good place, feel pretty comfortable.
I think early in your career, it's better to go deep on technology than wide as far as like breadth of knowledge. Go deep on your knowledge, because then you can transfer that knowledge into some other technology. If you learn a language like really, really well, then when you pivot to another language, you can transfer a lot more of that knowledge. But if literally all you do is hello world, that's going to feel very comfortable to you. And so the next programming language, all you're going to know how to do is hello world. You move to another programming language, again, all you're going to know how to do is hello world. you're not going
Yeah.
to know, like, how do I map over this data structure? How do I filter out different kinds of results? How do I do this or that? How do I import different kinds of libraries and different ways to do things? Like,
Yeah.
how do I build libraries and modules and so on? Like, if you're not going that deep on a language, you're not going to have that skill level. And that's what a lot of
Yeah.
companies need. They need more than just hello world. They need you to have like that deeper knowledge. So I always tell people early in your career, go deep. And
Hmm.
instead of going wide on your skills, like wide can come later, but you got to go deep on something
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna ask you about resumes because, like, personally, it's like to me, it's a chore to have. I know you need the resume, but like, I basically just kept tacking stuff onto it. Nowadays, I trim my work experience a bit because like, there's no point in showing like stuff I did 20. Well, that's what I've been doing because I've been always.
Right.
These are things I've been told no longer than 2 pages. And then like even the order of stuff.
Try to
Like
keep
at
it
one
recent,
point.
everything.
I'm just curious what some of your thoughts are on like resumes. Like I know we can't cover it all in like 9 minutes, but just some
I
kind
can
of
give
like
you,
highlights.
yeah, I'll give you my condensed version. So what I tell people is I usually start with a riddle. Nick, how do you make a sculpture of an elephant?
Okay, I gotta find some clay first.
You start with a giant block of stone and you chip away everything that doesn't look like an elephant. So that's one way to think about it. So if you build a big giant resume with like all of your experiences, all of your technologies, all of your skills, all of the projects that you've ever done, make a gigantic resume out of that. And now when
Okay.
you're ready to go apply for a job, you trim away everything. So you make a copy of it and you trim away everything that doesn't make you look like the best applicant for that job. You take away the technologies they don't care about. You take away the projects they don't care about. You take bullet
Hmm.
points off of that job that they're not going to care about. And that's how you trim it back down to a page or 2 pages, depending on the kind of
Yeah.
experience that you want to show them. When I was applying for the
Hmm.
DevRel role, for example, I actually put one of my very first jobs on page 1 of my resume from 26 years
Okay.
ago, where I was doing tech support and sales engineering, because that's very applicable to what I do as a developer advocate.
Gotcha.
And it was 20 odd years ago, but it just goes to show like I cared about the developer experience and I cared about taking care of customers. Even 26
Hmm.
years ago in my career, that's still a skill that I carry today, where
Yeah.
it's not just something that I've learned in the past year. It's like, no, I've been doing this all along. That
Hmm.
kind of stuff will really stand out. And so having long lived experience on the resume is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you can show how it's applicable to them and how you're
Yeah.
bringing that value to them. And so by starting with that enormous resume and then trim it back down to 1 page as you're applying for that job, now you've got a tailored resume just for them. And
Yeah.
so if they're looking for a Python developer that knows JavaScript and you know both of those, let's say you know JavaScript a little bit better than Python. But if I'm looking for a Python developer, you're going to put all your Python stuff first. You're going to show me a
Hmm.
Python project and then show me a JavaScript project later, because you want to look like a Python developer who knows JavaScript. You don't want to say like, oh yeah, I'm a JavaScript developer and I happen to know Python. It's like, but I'm looking for a Python
Yeah.
developer that knows JavaScript. And maybe I'll still consider you in my maybe pile because you have both of those technologies. But if you look like a Python developer, and that's the primary need that I have on my team, I'm more likely to call
Yeah.
you. But if you also list like tons of C# projects and your Java projects, it's like, that's not relevant to me. I don't care about those. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, you've got back-end experience and maybe you've done some interesting stuff there, but it's not a relevant, necessarily transferable skill to what I need you to be doing in Python for this particular role. And so by
Yeah.
trimming away all the stuff that I don't care about for my job, and you take a minute or two to like trim that stuff out, it's way easier to delete
Yeah.
stuff than to add stuff back into a resume later. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
keep that big giant resume, and just as you're working on projects, you're just going to keep adding to it and keep adding to it and keep adding to it. And now when you apply for a job, you've got something up to date that you can start trimming all that stuff out, trim it back down to that
Gotcha.
1 page or 2 page, depending on what you want to show. So yes, I do agree, it needs to be like relevant experience is absolutely a must, but also
Yeah.
decently recent experience if you've been in the industry a long time. I don't put any of my programming from mid 90s through mid 2000s because it was all Perl
Yeah.
and PHP. I don't want to work in those technologies anymore, so I don't even list that stuff on my resume, because I don't want
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
hitting me up going, oh, PHP, you should come work at my job in PHP. It's like, well, you're probably using PHP 7 or 8 now. I last used PHP in version 4, and it was a garbage
Yeah.
language back then, and it makes me not want to work in PHP. So no, I don't want another PHP job because I didn't like the language, and that's kind of lingering, and that's going to be like a mental hurdle to get over learned. So I'm not up to date on PHP. So I don't even put that on my resume anymore. But I'm sure as heck going to put all of the recent projects and stuff like that on there that are going to be applicable to that particular company.
Yeah, for sure. I had to remove SharePoint off my resume at some point because like when I was doing C# and ASP.NET, I worked at one place where we were using SharePoint at one point, so I had it on there, and I just did not want to work in that, and I kept getting recruiters sending. So finally, I was just like, you know what, I'm removing it, and it does work. Yeah, cool. That's great insights there. I know you definitely have a lot more insights in that. I'm gonna drop links to all your stuff, like the YouTube and the Twitter and the Twitch, and folks can definitely check out the tech interview guide. I know you have a hard stop at 2:30, so I definitely want to give you a minute or two before that, so you can at least maybe bathroom break or something. But I just wanted to say it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know you could do with Postman, and that was really cool to see all that. And we actually built something out with the Netlify API that I've never used. It's not the team I work on, but it was still cool to check it out. Thanks for all the interview stuff too. Is there anything you want to, no worries. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before we call it.
No, it was cool hanging out. We hadn't actually done a stream, but we've been on each other's streams off and on over the past year or so. So it was cool to actually hang out and chat a little bit more. And anytime you want to nerd out on Postman, you know who to call.
Yeah. Cool. All right, and I'll drop a link for folks. Thanks again, everybody. Next week, we've got Brian Douglas, a.k.a. B. Dougie from GitHub.
B. Dougie,
Open
Mr. Douglas.
I'm on the Douglas train at the moment, so check that out next Wednesday as well, and we will see you next week, folks.
Awesome.